How many civilians were killed?
The National Human Rights Commission of Panama interviewed hundreds of people in an effort to determine how many had died.
What we have is different testimonies that help us to arrive to the conclusion that for sure there were more than 4,000 people who died.
You have the UN Human Rights Commission estimating 2,500 deaths. You have the two major independent human rights organizations in the region estimating 2,500, 3,000, 3,500. You have Isabel Cordero and her organization estimating probably about 4,000. That's an enormous human toll.
The U.S. military said 250 civilians were killed. I mean, there isn't a credible source in Panama that believes that's true. Whether it's ambulance drivers, human rights monitors, people, doctors who worked in hospitals, neighbors of bombed out blocks, it's just clearly false. That story would be so easy to tell for any journalist worth his or her salt, but they're not telling it.
I made a point of reading the European press as well as the American press when the invasion occurred, and immediately I could see that whereas the American press was talking about maybe a couple of hundred civilian casualties, from the very beginning the European press was talking about 1,000 civilians dead or 2,000 civilians dead. So the real facts are that the American people didn't really know what had happened in Panama.
You would think from the video clips that we had seen that this whole thing was just a Mardi Gras, that the people in Panama were just jumping up and down with glee, and that our forces had just moved in there and without taking any lives at all have brought liberty and freedom to these oppressed people.
We're tired of this situation in Panama.
It doesn't feel like intervention?
No, it's not intervention. They came to save us. I thank them. I love them. I love the North Americans right now.
So you think this will end soon?
When they interviewed people in Panama about what they thought of it, they invariably were interviewing white, middle-class people who could speak English. They didn't really go into the poor neighborhoods where people had been bombed. Did you see one media actually go into the bombed areas and talk to people who had lost a family or lost everything they had in the bombings?
The transport plane.
They focused totally on the invasion as a tactical event. Was it effective? Did it work well? Are we losing many American lives?
While another unit moved in by helicopter.
15 American servicemen have died in the combat today. Some of it
but not all the news is good. American casualties are now put at 15 dead and more than 100.
Also announced that one American civilian has been killed. That would make a total of 16.
Panama fighting is a school teacher, apparently hit by stray gunfire. Gertrude Candy Halen from Dixon, Illinois, is the 20th American to die in the fight.
They focused with utter ethnocentrism only on American lives. The only life that was precious, the only life that one could report on, the only life that one could consider as a serious loss was an American life.
Tonight, as we end this program, we hear from President Bush on the high price these young men paid, and we say goodbye to them.
Every human life is precious, and yet I have to answer, yes, it has been worth it.
In the months following the invasion, Panamanians were shocked to discover the existence of mass graves where hundreds, perhaps thousands of bodies were hastily dumped into pits and buried by U.S. troops.
There was a report of what some were calling a mass grave, which I think is a term that is imprecise.
No, I didn't say we had any mass burials. There was one case of some number, but I cannot quote to you that number.
To date, there have been 15 mass graves that have been identified throughout Panama. The United States military was directly responsible for the killings of the men, women, and children that are in these mass graves and for their burial. These mass graves exist throughout Panama, and some are believed to be on U.S. military bases, which creates a difficulty in terms of access to these mass graves.
Among these corpses, we found many young people, 15, 16, 18 years old. We found people in their 60s and in their 70s. We found people killed by a shot to the back of their heads, dead with their hands tied, dead with casts on their legs or arms.
Although the Pentagon insists that no more than 516 Panamanians were killed, they do concede that over 75% of those killed were civilians. Families of the victims continue to demand a full accounting of the missing and the dead.
Who has the right to determine how many people should be killed in an invasion? I think if one person got killed in an invasion that is illegal, that it violates all principles of human rights, the number of people, the quantity, the figures, if it's 10,000 or if it's one, is irrelevant. The issue that innocent people were killed. A lot of people die. Too many people die.
Although the U.S. media created a perception of support for the invasion within the United States, the invasion was overwhelmingly condemned in the international community.
If you look at any document in international law, any of numerous treaties, it's clear that this invasion was illegal. It's not debatable.
The Panama invasion violates the UN Charter and the OAS Charter, which have specific prohibitions against invasions of a sovereign country and invasions of the territorial integrity of other countries. These prohibitions are very strict and clear under international law. The United States' actions in violation of human rights also violates the Geneva Conventions, which protect civilians from indiscriminate acts of violence as had occurred against civilian victims in Panama.
The four biggest, most important papers in this country all endorsed the rightness of the Panama invasion. That's the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, strong endorsement, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. Every one of them. Now, a little body known as the United Nations had a vote about this. On December 29th, they voted by an overwhelming majority to condemn the invasion as, in their words, a flagrant violation of international law. So I was interested to see that night on the NBC Nightly News with that great newscaster Deborah Norville, absolutely no mention whatsoever of this vote. Turning to CBS, the bastion of responsible broadcasting, I found a full 10 seconds lavished on that story.
At the United Nations today, the General Assembly adopted a resolution deploring the U.S. invasion of Panama as a, quote, flagrant violation of international law. The vote 75-20 with 40 abstentions.
The media was so cooperative with the government because the media are owned by the same interests that are being defended in Central America by that government policy. The media are not close to corporate America. They're not favorable to corporate America. They are corporate America. They're an integral part of corporate America.
We are a plutocracy. We ought to face it. A country in which wealth controls. It may be true of all countries, more or less, but it's uniquely true of ours because of our materialism and the concentration of wealth here. even our democratic processes are hardly that, because money dominates politics, and we know it. And through politics, it dominates government, and it dominates the media. We really need desperately to find new ways to hear independent voices and points of view. It's the only way we're going to find the truth.
The truth about the invasion of Panama remains hidden from most Americans. Those who have studied the official accounts have discovered many contradictions and have arrived at disturbing conclusions.
I have studied everything that the president has said as to reasons why he ordered the invasion. And none of those things, singly or collectively, makes any legal, moral, or constitutional sense.
One of the reasons for the invasion was to take the wimp image off President George Bush. He had had the what now seems to be the necessary blooding of a United States president to show his forcefulness and his machismo. This was a chance for the military to show what it could do.
If they kill an American Marine, that's real bad. And if they threaten and brutalize the wife of an American citizen, sexually threatening the lieutenant's wife while kicking him in the groin over and over again, this president is going to do something about it.
When he would say that the loss of American life was the last straw, sure, there must be something we could have done. Certainly there must have been papers we could have filed. We could have gone to the World Court. We could have gone to the United Nations or maybe the organizations of American states. But invade a country because of this is absolutely ridiculous.
The excuse that the invasion was to protect American lives is the one that's always given. The fact is there are 35,000 American citizens there, and none of them were in any danger. I was there 3 weeks before the invasion. There's simply no evidence, and I don't think the administration has ever bothered to even give any evidence to that statement.
The goals of the United States have been to safeguard the lives of Americans, to defend democracy in Panama.
Then President Bush said we had to go to restore democracy in Panama. How in the world do you restore that which